would lead a person to a condition where the person is not able to cope with the stress of the situation. Let's find out what the dictionary meaning of stress is. So I shall open up my PowerPoint presentation because it's like a walking stick for me. It guides me through and allows me not to digress. So I shall resort to that. Here we are. This is the heading, but I'll go to the next. Yeah. What is stress? The dictionary meaning is stress is a natural response to challenges and threats in life, and can be a feeling of emotional strain and pressure also. It can be caused by many different situations. So it's a response not just to any situation, but challenges and threats in life. So that means it's some kind of a test to one's own ability to manage, one's own ability to cope with that particular situation. The situation could be anything. It could be in the behavior of somebody else, or it could be the response of one's own self to somebody's words or behavior. It could be any of those. Now, I have put down some causes of stress. These are not the only ones. There are many, many things that can happen, and it will depend upon the individual what kind of stress one has to face. One is bereavement, when someone dies in the family, especially someone who is very close and who is a very, maybe it's a very close relative. Or it could be divorce or separation, losing a job, unexpected money problems, starting a new job, serious illness, and various other things. And it could be manifested through some kind of a physical manifestation like headaches, body pains, upset stomach. It could be trouble sleeping, sleeplessness, loss of appetite, or sometimes eating more than usual. That also happens. It depends upon the individual for the response. Then it could be a sense of anxiety and also irritability, which is not understandable by the person himself or herself. Getting sick more easily. So we find that some situation could cause a mental strain as some kind of a response. And then it could go on to a physical strain also, a physical manifestation. So we find it's a huge cycle. So one has to find out what the cause of the stress is. You might have noticed yesterday we did face a few questions about what one's own understanding of oneself is. And it is essential for every person to think about what one's thoughts are centered on. If there happens to be some kind of a challenge or threat, I think a person should calmly think about the challenge or threat and find out how best to overcome it. Let's see what is in the second slide. Now it says, while a small amount of stress can be beneficial, too much strain can cause physical and mental health problems. Chronic stress, again, can worsen pre-existing health problems and may increase the use of alcohol, tobacco, and other substances, which people mistakenly think could give them relief, but they don't. Now, a further explanation about how a small amount of stress can be beneficial is given in the next paragraph. In psychology, stress is a feeling of emotional strain and pressure that we all know. But stress is a form of psychological mental discomfort usually. But small amounts of stress may sometimes be beneficial. For instance, let's take a student who is studying for an examination. A certain amount of stress may be there before the exam comes on. but that will end in the student working harder for the exam. Of course, it depends upon the interest the student has on his own studies. But if a person is really studious and wants to do well at the exam, a small amount of stress could be beneficial and can improve. They've given an example of athletic performance, but I would also say that academic performance also is affected by a small amount of stress, and usually it results in a good, beneficial way. Motivation and reaction to the environment also would happen. Excessive amounts of strain, however, or stress, however, can increase the risk of physical ailments like strokes, heart attacks, ulcers, mental illnesses such as depression, and also aggravate pre existing conditions. This has been taken from the World Health Organization's article on stress and your health from Medline Plus Medical Encyclopedia. Now we find these are some of the sources of stress or categories of stress. I put them down here as mental, physical, and emotional. These are the three main causes or sources of stress. We find that on the mental level, one can go into depression, sometimes a very light one which can be overcome. But very often it becomes a chronic one or a recurring one. So depression is something that one should try to avoid. There could be a melancholy feeling in a person also when there is a mental strain, or, for instance, some kind of a bereavement, as I said earlier, in the family could cause a melancholy feeling. But the person has to check on it and see if the melancholy feeling persists. For some time it may be there, but then it should not persist. So this is left to oneself, how well the person is able to cope with a situation. There could be apathy also. Apathy would be not taking an interest in anything, a general kind of disinterest about everything, and hostility sometimes without reason at all. And it could end in a person shouting at others or being rude to other people. It could show in the behavior also of a person. So mental stress is something that should be checked, and the person should find out if it can be helped. On the physical plane, this same mental stress could result or end in a general tiredness. It may be a psychosomatic one, headaches, digestive problems, which are not really there. If you went to a doctor, the doctor might say, oh no, there's nothing. So one should understand that the mental strain or stress could result in these. And psychosomatic symptoms would be the same. For instance, it's not really there, but it seems to be there. It's a kind of apparent one, which is not real. And the third one, emotional, which is also very difficult sometimes to control or take stock of. Tearfulness, crying for no reason. This happens more in women than men. And general apathy, as we've already talked about, in the mental stress. Sleeplessness, inability to focus. As I said, I have put down only a few here. But you can analyze your own condition and check on it and find out whether this is a positive thing or to be checked. So usually a human being can analyze oneself and find out whether there is some kind of a stress happening. So at this point, I think a human being should sit down, as we said yesterday about goals and aspirations, that a person has to sit in solitude, it said, should have a space of stillness, it said yesterday, as Dave Hollis said, that one has to take stock of one's own condition. For instance, one could stop for a while. Supposing there's a lot of work going on, there's a lot of mental stress at the workplace, and as a result, one also feels very, very tired. It'll be a good idea to take off for a day or two, to just rest a while. And at that time, one should not have any thoughts about the office or thoughts about the things that are causing the stress and strain. This is something that one has to do consciously. It cannot happen just like that. And for each individual, maybe the stress or the level of stress is different. And accordingly, one needs to take stock of that and find out if for a period one could stop thinking about this, because everything is a response due to one's own thinking and one's own ability or inability to confront with situations. So the situations could be like the reactions or responses, and they could be to actual situations, like, for instance, overwork, or to people. As a result of that overwork, one might be irritable towards people, so that even a joke shared by a friend seems to be very irritating. Then to words, again, the normal response might be something, but when one is in a condition of stress, the words might seem to be harsher than usual. And then to actions, naturally, a normal behavior by somebody else might seem as if it is aimed at ridiculing you or something like that. So reactions and responses to all these situations, people, words, or actions, could be different with different people and according to different situations. And the situations and your response would depend entirely on how well you're able to manage that situation. Sometimes it could be a kind of pause that you give yourself so that you're relieved of that stress, and then you go back, or you find a problem which is solved can relieve you of your stress. Now, here we have reactions or responses. They could result in tendencies which could be temporary or permanent. For instance, irritability, I could take as an example. It might become a tendency with people because you find that it gives you relief to be irritable to someone. You imagine that it's giving you some kind of a relief from your stress, but actually it is becoming a tendency. And so it has to be stopped. One has to find out what caused that irritability and whether it's temporary or permanent, and correct it at the proper time. Then this could result in a personality. It could be positive or negative, because if you're able to cope with your tendency, if you're able to cope with your stress and strain, it would become a positive one. It will become a very genial person. And so the character also would change. It could be genial. It could be, on the other hand, a negative one, like an unfriendly personality. Or it could be, again, sociable. That means you can be friendly with people because you've been able to find out and you've been able to diagnose your own response to your stress. And so you find that you are able to be friendly with people. Now, all these things would result in thoughts, which again result in impressions. Impressions are things that stick to oneself. They go deep down and they affect one's behavior, one's speech. So the impressions could be deep and strong, or they could be light and erasable, or they may come from one's inner perceptions or superstitions or biases. They may not be real at all, but they may come from an inner perception or bias. And it may also come from traditions from the family or community, or it could be from a religious background. All these are impressions that need to be removed, because impressions are the reasons why people are usually unable to cope with stress. Now here, impressions are reactions which lead to stress manifestations. Impressions are also a result of our thought processes. The mind is considered to be the source of all thoughts. So it is logical to assume that if somehow one can slow down the thought process, one could overcome stress. Now, this is the basis of my presentation, that one should be able to tackle the thought process, because that is ultimately the culprit for all stresses and strains. So if one could somehow, bring down the pace at which thoughts are produced, one could overcome stress. Now, one cannot stop the thoughts from moving around in the mind. One cannot, even in a dream, for instance. The dream is because of the impressions that we create in ourselves, and it is impossible to control them. But one can, train oneself not to pay attention to these thoughts, not to be conscious of the thoughts. Now, there are many ways of diverting the mind from producing more and more thoughts. So here we come to stress management. Is it possible? If not, if you cannot cope with the stress, can you at least try to manage it, which could ultimately result in stress? That is, more and more thoughts resulting in stress. Can you do that? Can you control thoughts? These ways are called channelizing or relaxing activities. Like, for instance, one could listen to music, one could read a book, or one could exercise, or one could do yoga. And there are umpteen other things that one could do to divert the mind and try to bring about some kind of lessening of thoughts or not paying too much attention. For instance, if an artist is engrossed in painting something, any amount of jostling, any amount of sound around, or any amount of disturbance will not disturb the person, provided the person is totally focused. And at that time, when that activity is going on, one is able to not think of thoughts at all. While all these and more lead one to do de-stressing, the best way would be not just divert the mind, but to allow the mind to rest. This is something that I have found to be a very logical reason why we need to have some kind of, I won't say control, but some kind of pacification for the mind. Just as the body needs rest, and when you get up in the morning, you feel rejuvenated, the mind also needs to be rested for some time. And the best way would be, even if the mind was involved in thinking, if you didn't pay attention to the thoughts, then it would be giving the mind some rest. Because even in sleeping, when the body is sleeping, the mind is still busy churning out those dreams. So just as sleep rejuvenates the body from physical stress, meditation could rejuvenate the mind by allowing it to have its much needed rest from conscious thought production. We think of children, very young children, infants especially, they are active. And when they are overactive, they don't know how to express themselves, but they are tired and they need rest. But before going to sleep, the child whimpers, cries, sometimes even screams. That is actually, letting go of its own stress and strain and the reaction in the body of tiredness. And when the child is rested and sleeps well, the child comes out with a big smile, very, very ready to face the whole world. It's much the same with human beings, with adults. Just as in sleep, one does move the limbs or turn over, which one is not conscious of. The mind is trained not to be conscious of thoughts through meditation. So this is the reason why meditation is considered to be one of the best methods of rejuvenating the mind, resting the mind, and allowing the mind not to pay attention to its own thoughts and to be able to function much better, to be able to cope with strain much better, to manage strain much better. So meditation is a natural form, and it's something that everyone can do. Now, I think it's time for me to pause a while. If you have any questions, you can post them in the chat box, and I shall see to it that I'm able to at least try. I will at least try to answer those questions afterwards. But now I think it's time for us to stop. Thank you all. Like yesterday, I would again take you through the relaxation process, and then we'll go into meditation. Please close your eyes. Suggest to yourself that you are about to relax so that your heartbeats can slow down, your breathing can slow down and deepen, and you could be refreshed in every way. The healing energy from the earth is moving into your body through the soles of your feet. The energy moves into the feet, the ankles, the calf muscles, the knees, the thighs, relaxing both the legs from the tips of the toes to the top. The energy now moves into the torso. It relaxes the stomach muscles, the muscles at the waist, the muscles of the chest, and at the back, the lower back, the mid back, and the upper back. The healing energy relaxes the whole of the torso completely. Now the energy moves into the arms, both the left and the right, relaxing the upper arms, the elbows, the lower arms, the wrists, the palms, and fingers. Both the arms from the tips of the fingers to the top are completely relaxed. Now the healing energy moves into the shoulders and neck muscles, relaxing them completely. From the neck, the healing energy goes into the facial muscles, relaxing them completely. The jaws, the mouth, the cheeks, the nose, the ears, the gently closed eyes, the forehead, and the top of the head are all completely relaxed. Now the healing energy moves into the mind, relaxing it completely and giving it peace and calm. From the mind, the healing energy moves into the heart, which is beating gently and slowly. There is a divine light within the heart, which is illuminating not only the heart, but the entire self. With this supposition, please start meditation. That's all. There are two questions here. One says, what should we do to avoid overthinking and being stressed up? I've already spoken about this, that overthinking is actually not paying attention to your thinking or lessening the thought processes. This could happen due to any of the methods for leisure activities, for instance, exercising or listening to music or anything. But the best way it has been found is meditation. And that is why now meditation has been introduced all over the world, or in December on 21st. So I think the recognition is only because scientists all over the world also are recognizing the merit of meditation as slowing down all the processes, including thinking perhaps. The heartbeats are slower, the breathing becomes slower, and therefore the result is that your thinking becomes dulled and you don't pay attention to it. Question number 2 is, does everyone respond to stress the same way? No. It depends upon the resilience of the person, or it depends upon the way the person is able to find out the root cause of the stress and find ways and means of overcoming that to the best possible. And therefore, the main thing is for a person to recognize one's own stress, find out what exactly probably is the reason why it's happening, and either give it, as I said, a pause or try to find out how best to cope with the situation. So I think, first of all, the recognition, the diagnosis, and then the management would be able to solve the problem. Any other questions?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you very much for your attention and response. And I again thank Ayaz as well as Deepak Khanduri for the opportunity given to me to share thoughts with you. I hope sometime we can meet each other, all of you. All the best.
Thank you, ma'am, for delivering this amazing session. And thanks to all the participants who have joined this session. And also thanks to our expert Deepak Khanduri sir for being with us throughout the session. With this, we are concluding this session. Thank you all.
Thank you and good night.